So let's take a look at some common user questions in terms of geometry. And the first one that we really seem to experience is that the commands seem overly clicky. We're entering values into the panel and then I'm being prompted at the cursor prompt. And why is that? So let's take a look at that. It all stems down to the customizable command set that we have. The commands load the last used settings from an XML file behind the scenes for the product. These locked values can be stored and propagated forward to force values coming in, and also define what is prompted and what the user has to enter. These prompts can be hidden, displayed in the tool settings, or with a prompt or with a locked value. So you have a choice of how you set this up and customize it.
This example, I'm just going to utilize the chain command here to actually link commands together. So I want to utilize and maintain, preserve the snap from the previous element. So I've linked those two elements together. Now I want to draw a fillet in here. So in this instance I can look between the command set that I've got available, and I actually want to use the full command of arc between elements. Now it loads in with the previously used settings, so it's come straight in with a value. If I don't want that value, I can use the end key to unlock, and now I'm into a dynamic mode and I can adjust the values as I need. If I type in a value at the cursor prompt, I can lock it in. I can similarly go to the panel if I want to and amend the values that I'm using. So I can change them in the panel, and we can see it's reflected in the graphics, or I can use the right cursor key to go through to those values and modify those at the cursor prompt as well. Once I'm happy with my selection, I can place it down. The final prompt that we have here is for a trim extend option, where I have a choice as to what I want to utilize. In this instance I'm going to trim both. The geometry that's created, we can see that the original intent is still there between the two pieces of geometry, even though we have now trimmed those back. So we're preserving that geometry and preserving the snap that's there. So if we come and make a change to this line, the snap is preserved and carried through, and all of the geometry updates.
So what we've seen there is an example of where we can blend the workflows between using the panel and the cursor prompt itself. You can customize that to the level that you want to see, and understanding why it's loading in values and locking values is important to being efficient in use. What I would suggest will happen is that as you become more experienced, you'll be starting to use those cursor prompts much more. But remember that you've got left and right and up and down on the cursor prompt to allow you to navigate through what's on the panel, unlocking values and entering new values. And if you are integrating with Civil AccuDraw to try and build up additional relationships, just remember that when you activate AccuDraw, you can use the tab key to move between the fields. So another common question, and it really stems off some of the back of the conceptual modeling type presentations that we do occasionally, is how do we use the auto 3D functionality? So I want to draft in 2D, but I do want to see this 3D functionality. So let's take a look at this.
Auto 3D toggled on by the feature definition toolbar, and in this case I'm going to use the apply template as well, so this is part of my feature definition. Allows us to generate geometry, and in this case I'm just going to quickly sketch something out that automatically drapes the profile onto the ground surface and gives us a means of quick conceptual design, applying a template and seeing it in 3D. So just from drafting the horizontal geometry, we have got both a profile and the corridor generation. The profile that's been applied is a best fit. If we look at the parameters for this, we can see it's just applying an upper and a lower envelope and desirable curve lengths and so on as a default. So we can come in and perhaps in a situation where we want to look at a conceptual, just push it above in this image of draped terrain and give a lower envelope, just in an overlay situation, keeping it low, so that we end up with a reasonable approximation tying into the ground that gives us that conceptual design capability automatically from 3D that we can then go on to refine, adjust geometry both horizontally and vertically. In site-based situations, the Create 3D automatically applies slope or snap rules based on the reference geometry. So in this situation, offsetting from existing geometry, it will apply a slope rule onto the geometry that is, in this instance, 0%. An additional mode that is provided is when we apply something like a simple arc or any of the fillet commands, whereby a rule is created that applies a parabolic rule onto the profile. So if we have a look at the element info for this, we will have a parabolic transition between the approach grade and the departure grade. It's a dynamic rule, as you'd expect, so if we apply a vertical offset just onto this side piece and drop it down, we can see automatically adjusts to react to the change in the grade on the approach. The final mode that we have is a snap based mode. So if we are working off elements that have existing geometry and we are trying to snap out and close the shape, in this instance just closing out in between these two lines, we can snap and apply and close the shape out, and it adopts the Z value of the geometry that you're coming off.
So what we've seen there is a couple of uses of the Auto 3D, a couple of modes appropriate to that use. So the conceptual drape mode, where we're picking in free space essentially, and we're draping it on the active terrain, and it generates a best fit profile. So this is particularly useful in conceptual and overlay situations. And the other situation with Auto 3D is in site modelling, building of civil cells and projecting off them, where it automatically applies a slope rule of 0%, which we can then modify later on, or a snap rule, where it will assume the value of the element you're snapping onto. And things like the fillets, anything where we have fully defined fixity for the lead-in, lead-out grades, then it will apply this parabolic transition between them as well. So a few use cases where the Auto 3D really kicks in and starts to provide value, but you need to understand the setup of those.